It's kind of like memorizing your kid's voice, or it's like memorizing a voice of a good friend. You can tell when it's just me or when it's the Lord. And so I want to encourage you, first of all, if you're serious about hearing God's voice, to pick some passages in the Bible, longer passages if you can, and slowly memorize them. And first you'll see God do a good work just through that process alone. But then start to recognize how God's voice is obvious in that memorization. So hearing God's voice is such an important part of following Jesus and being a disciple. Actually, hearing God's voice is possible for everyone. God speaks not only to grown pastors and men, He speaks to women and children and everyone. And actually understanding and hearing God's voice is one of the things that's going to direct you most and be such a powerful thing in your walk with God. But one of the questions I get a lot is, how do I know that's God's voice and not just, my own thoughts? Or even worse, how do I know that's not like Satan talking to me or something like that? Jesus tells us that the sheep understand, or the sheep know the voice of the shepherd. It reminds me of this, if I'm sitting in a park with my kids and a kid screams and I'm talking to a bunch of parents, whoever's kid it is, their parent's gonna stand up. I'm not gonna stand up. If I hear my kid scream, I'm gonna stand up and none of the parents are. There's something weird that's built into moms and dads that spend a lot of time with their kids, that your own kid's scream or your own kid's voice more than other kids or whatever. And this is true of sheep. When their own shepherd calls out, if you see a bunch of sheep mixed together and there's 3 shepherds in the Middle East, you'll see that they'll all go and follow the voice of their own shepherd. And this is how we can be too. So how do we know that what we're hearing is God's voice? And the answer is actually pretty simple. We have to train ourselves to hear God's voice by memorizing Scripture. Not just reading Scripture, that's useful, but we need to memorize it. In fact, most people in the first century who were Jewish had the first 5 books of the Bible memorized. It was a part of their education. And so when you have books of the Bible memorized, it's kind of like memorizing your kid's voice, or it's like memorizing a voice of a good friend. You can tell when it's just me or when it's the Lord. And so I want to encourage you, first of all, if you're serious about hearing God's voice, to pick some passages in the Bible, longer passages if you can, and slowly memorize them. And first you'll see God do a good work just through that process alone. But then start to recognize how God's voice is obvious in that memorization, and begin to try and listen and practically live out what God says to you. The second thing that I would say is, God has a language and it's not English. God's language is knowledge. So when God speaks to you, sometimes He'll give you a sentence. I know there are some people that feel that. Most Christians I know, when they hear God's voice, they hear knowledge. And when they say, God said to me, sa-da-da-da-da-da-da, they're translating knowledge that was given to them in the Spirit. So I want to encourage you. You can hear God's voice. You can do it. It might take some time to train yourself to get there, but you do it through memorization of Scripture and by practically living it out. And I know within a few months, God will start speaking to you too.
At TBN, our mission is to use every available means to reach as many individuals and families as possible with the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thank you for helping make the gospel of grace go around the world.
Without you, we couldn't do it. God bless you.